You may think you already know the limits of your strength. You may believe you've mapped the borders of your potential and learned where the walls are. But what if everything you've accepted as a boundary is nothing more than a shadow? What if the doubts you carry, the fears you rehearse, and the setbacks you replay are not signs of who you are, but invitations to look deeper? Beneath the noise of self-criticism and comparison lives a quieter truth, a fire that never went out, only waiting for you to remember it's still there. By the time you reach your 30s and 40s, life has already asked more from you than you ever thought you could give. You've had nights when sleep was impossible, and mornings when the weight of responsibility made you want to stay in bed. Yet you rose. You faced choices that terrified you, but you made them anyway. You've carried burdens without applause and endured pain without anyone noticing. And while you may forget these moments, they are evidence of a deeper strength. We tend to archive our failures with perfect memory, while our resilience slips quietly into the background. That is why so many people feel weaker with age, not because they've lost their strength, but because they've lost sight of it. This is where Stoicism remains so alive. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. The fire within you never dies. It may retreat. It may flicker. It may hide beneath the pressure of expectations or the noise of comparison, but it never vanishes. Think of the times you stood on the edge of collapse and still managed to move forward. Perhaps you didn't give a speech or fight a battle. Perhaps you simply went to work while your heart was heavy, or smiled at a child when your own spirit felt broken. Those were not moments of weakness. They were moments of quiet, unshakable power. The world tells us change must be dramatic. It sells us the fantasy that transformation arrives like a lightning strike, with grand music and a sudden revelation. But real change is subtle. It begins with recognition, the moment you decide that doubt is no longer the language you live by. It grows in the small, repeated choices that nobody sees, the habits that no one praises, the quiet acts of resilience that slowly shape your identity. That is what this space, StoicCraft, exists to remind you of. Not empty slogans, not quick fixes, not the noise of trends, but the steady truth that you already have what you need. This channel is here to help you reconnect with that truth, the truth that your fire never left you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. So pause for a moment and ask yourself honestly, am I living as the best version of myself, or as the version shaped by the expectations of others? How many times have I ignored the proof of my own strength simply because it didn't come with recognition? And am I willing to believe, even quietly, that the fire inside me never died and can rise again starting today? If those questions stir something in you, however small, it means the journey has already begun. Because the greatest shift you will ever experience is not becoming someone new. It is remembering who you truly are. Let's stay with that flicker for a moment and look at it without rushing past it. Hidden strength rarely announces itself. It shows up as a nudge, a steadiness in your chest when everything else feels noisy. You felt it before at unexpected times, in a meeting where you didn't crumble, in a crisis where your hands acted before your fear could speak, in a season when the bills piled up and you still found a way to be kind. We tend to tell ourselves those were accidents, or just what anyone would do. That's not true. Those moments were you, the deeper you, stepping forward. The work now is to recognize that presence on purpose, not as a fluke, but as a feature of who you are. Recognition begins with attention, not the kind you give to a screen, but the kind you give to your breath when the house is finally quiet and the day loosens its grip. Sit with yourself for a few minutes and replay a hard scene from your life. Watch it like a slow-motion reel, not to judge it, but to notice what you actually did. You made a call you were afraid to make. You listened instead of exploding. You carried someone else's weight for a while, even though your own back already ached. None of that is small. These are the fingerprints of your character. When you name them clearly, patience here, courage there, resourcefulness in that tight corner, your mind begins to build an honest map of who you are, not a distorted one drawn by fear. This is where memory becomes medicine. Doubt thrives on amnesia. It needs you to forget the evidence. So create a proof journal, something ordinary and nearby, not sacred or precious. Each day, write one line about a moment you showed strength, not perfection, strength. I kept my tone calm when the email was baiting me. I went for a 20-minute walk instead of doom scrolling. I told the truth even though it cost me. That's it. One line. Over time, this becomes a ledger of reality. When the old narrative returns, you never follow through. You can't handle pressure. You can open those pages and answer, "I have data that says otherwise." You'll notice an objection rising, "But I still feel scared. I still hesitate. I still fail." Yes, so does everyone you admire. The presence of fear doesn't disqualify strength. It creates the conditions for strength to appear. The question is not, can I erase fear? The real question is, can I act with it in the room? Hidden strength is not the absence of discomfort. It is the capacity to move while discomfort talks. When your legs shake and you step anyway, your nervous system learns a new association. Fear and action can coexist. The more often you practice that pairing, the less power fear has to dictate your terms. Comparison will try to interrupt this learning. It will point to someone else's glossy milestone and say, "See, you're behind, but your strength is local. It lives in your specific circumstances, your responsibilities, your history." A single mother making a budget stretch is running a different race than a 20-something entrepreneur with no dependents. A mid-career professional who chooses integrity over advancement is not weaker than the colleague who sprints ahead by cutting corners. Hidden strength respects context. It measures progress in alignment, not applause. Here's another way to see it. Think of your attention as a lens and your day as a landscape. If the lens stays zoomed in on problems, all you'll notice are weeds. If you deliberately sweep the frame across what is working, the 5 minutes you breathed before you replied, the boundary you held, the workout you did at half energy instead of skipping, you're not lying to yourself. You are telling the whole story. This balanced lens is not self-help fluff. It's cognitive training. Your brain wires itself around what you repeatedly notice. If you never notice your strength, it won't disappear, but it will remain hidden, like a muscle you never flex. Strength also hides inside language. Listen to how you talk to yourself, especially after a mistake. Do you say, "I always screw this up," or do you say, "That didn't go the way I wanted"? What's the next right move? One sentence cements identity around failure. The other keeps identity open to growth. There is a quiet discipline in swapping fatalistic phrases for accurate ones. Accurate doesn't mean positive. It means precise. This presentation missed the mark because I overstuffed the middle. Next time I'll cut one example. Precision is a form of self-respect. It refuses to reduce you to a caricature, a practical exercise. Choose a recent challenge and write 3 columns. Situation, action, capacity. In the first, describe what happened, plainly. In the second, list what you actually did. In the third, name the underlying capacities your actions revealed. Composure, endurance, negotiation, restraint, creativity. Don't embellish. Don't dramatize. Just catalog. You will begin to see patterns. You de-escalate well. You plan under pressure. You keep promises quietly. Patterns are the visible skeleton of hidden strength. When you can point to them, you can trust them. Another place strength hides is in your boundaries. The yes that keeps the peace is often easier than the no that protects your values. But every time you deliver that honest no, not with hostility, but with clarity, you are practicing a form of courage that nobody will cheer in public. You are teaching yourself that your life is shaped by intention, not by the loudest request. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks. They don't isolate you. They preserve you so you can show up generously where it counts. And remember, progress can be embarrassingly small. 5 minutes of journaling. A single glass of water before coffee. 2 deep breaths before you speak. These sound trivial, but they're not. They are signals you send to yourself about who is in charge. When the signals repeat, identity shifts. You stop viewing strength as a mood you wait for and start experiencing it as a rhythm you keep. That rhythm is ordinary by design. Ordinary is sustainable. Sustainable becomes transformative. If you still doubt any of this, borrow a perspective from someone who loves you. Ask them to tell you about a time they watched you be strong. Listen without interrupting, without minimizing. Let their memory fill in the places where yours goes blank. Sometimes it takes another person's eyes to help you see what has always been true. Your strength is not theoretical. It's observable. It has witnesses. It's in the record. You don't need a new personality to be strong in the ways that matter. You need a clearer view and a consistent practice. Recognition is that view. Repetition is that practice. Together they turn the flicker into a steady flame, not flashy, not loud, but reliable. And reliability changes more about a life than intensity ever will. Keep noticing. Keep naming. Keep showing up. What was hidden won't stay hidden for long. Doubt is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that you have absorbed lessons from a world that often teaches hesitation more than confidence. Nobody is born unsure of themselves. Watch any child and you'll see boldness before fear, curiosity before shame, freedom before restraint. But as we grow, small messages accumulate. Tone it down. Don't stand out. Play it safe. These warnings are not always spoken directly. They arrive through the sideways glances of teachers, the impatience of parents, the envy of peers. Over time, they shape an invisible curriculum. You learn to second guess, to wait for permission, to lower your expectations, so disappointment hurts less. Doubt becomes a second language, fluent and automatic. For adults in midlife, this language is especially heavy. By 35 or 45, you've lived through years of evaluations, deadlines, bills, comparisons. The weight of what if grows larger because the stakes feel higher: mortgages, children, aging parents, careers that no longer have the freedom of endless experimentation. Every decision echoes, or so it seems, and so hesitation feels safer than action. But here's the paradox. Hesitation does not protect you. It slowly erodes your trust in yourself. Each time you hold back, you confirm a story that you are fragile. That story is a lie, but the repetition of it gives it the appearance of truth. Cognitive science now tells us something Stoic philosophers already suspected. The mind leans toward the negative. We are wired to remember threats more vividly than triumphs, to recall criticism more sharply than praise. This negativity bias once kept us alive in dangerous environments. Today it mostly keeps us small. When you receive 10 compliments and 1 insult, your mind grabs the insult and etches it in stone. The compliments dissolve like mist. It feels rational, but it's not. It's simply bias. And when left unchallenged, bias hardens into belief. The Stoics insisted on examining beliefs precisely because they knew unexamined ones become chains. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, and though we often quote that as a grand philosophical principle, it is also a daily practice. To examine your life is to pause when doubt whispers, "You can't do this," and ask, is that voice describing reality, or is it repeating an old lesson I never chose to believe in the first place? Aristotle added that excellence is not an act but a habit. If you habitually second-guess yourself, what kind of excellence do you expect to build? Habits of hesitation will never create a life of strength. Habits of self-respect will not think about where your doubt first took root. Was it in school when you were told your answer was wrong and the class laughed? Was it at home when a parent, without meaning harm, told you not to aim too high? Was it later when a colleague mocked your idea in front of others? These moments imprint us. They are not destiny, but they leave residue. The residue becomes a lens, and soon you are no longer looking at reality, but at a smudged version of it. The task of adulthood is to clean that lens, not so you see a perfect reflection, but so you see a clearer one. Doubt feels like logic, but it is usually conditioning. It tells you to wait for more data, more approval, more guarantees. But life rarely offers guarantees. Every meaningful step will carry uncertainty. If you wait until you feel perfectly ready, you'll wait forever. Readiness is built, not delivered. The irony is that by acting while doubting, you train yourself into confidence. Each time you step forward, even trembling, your nervous system records the message, "I can act even when I'm afraid." Over time, that message becomes stronger than the old programming dot. There is nothing childish about doubt. It is learned, yes, but it is persistent. Treating it as an enemy to be destroyed will only exhaust you. Treating it as a signal to be examined will free you. When doubt appears, don't scold yourself for feeling weak. Ask what it reveals about the old narratives you still carry. Doubt is the doorway to self-knowledge. Step through it, and you begin to dismantle the architecture of hesitation, brick by brick. Ignore it and the walls grow higher. Here is the truth. You don't have to wait until doubt disappears to live with courage. You only need to stop confusing doubt with identity. Doubt is weather. You are the sky. Doubt comes and goes. You remain. Once you see this clearly, you stop asking, "How do I get rid of doubt forever?" and start asking, "How do I keep moving even while doubt is present?" That shift alone can change the trajectory of your life. Confidence does not come from positive affirmations alone. It comes from memory, from remembering what you have already carried, endured, and conquered. The reason so many people in their late 30s and 40s feel fragile is not because they lack resilience, but because they have forgotten their own evidence. Think of all the days you woke up heavy but still got dressed. The nights you swallowed your pain so you could be present for others. The long seasons where quitting would have been easier but you didn't. These moments rarely get applause, yet they are the clearest record of your strength. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." You have been choosing all along, even when it looked like mere survival. Every time you endured, you made a choice. Every time you healed in pieces, you made a choice. Every time you took a step forward when nothing made sense, you made a choice. Those choices add up to more than survival. They add up to proof that you can keep becoming. The problem is not that you lack capacity. It is that you have lost track of it. Memory can be trained, just like muscles. But most of us train memory to favor weakness. We recall the criticism, the moments of embarrassment, the failures with such clarity that they dominate our self-image. Compliments are brushed aside as if they don't count. Successes are minimized as luck or not a big deal. Over time, this lopsided record convinces you that you are less than you truly are. The Stoics warned against this imbalance. Socrates believed that the unexamined life leads to suffering. The unexamined self, the refusal to reflect on what you have already overcome, traps you in a narrative of insufficiency, even when the facts say otherwise. Consider, for a moment, the last decade of your life. If you were to list the events that nearly broke you, financial strain, heartbreak, illness, loss, you might feel overwhelmed. But if you listed the responses you gave to those events, how you adapted, how you showed up, how you found ways to move forward, you would see another story. That story is not about fragility. It is about grit. It is about a steady persistence that doesn't ask for recognition, but proves itself anyway. Most of us believe we need more motivation. We don't. What we need is memory. Not a pep talk, not another slogan, but a quiet remembrance of everything we've already endured. The days that cracked you, but did not collapse you. The weeks where fear sat heavy on your chest, but you still fulfilled your duties. The seasons where you felt invisible, but kept moving anyway. That is your resume. Not the titles, not the metrics, not the external markers that rise and fall. Your true resume is written in perseverance. This is why resilience is not a rare gift that belongs only to the strong. It is a decision repeated daily. To keep going when there is no guarantee. To breathe when your chest tightens. To rise when no one is watching. Each repetition strengthens the record. Each record strengthens your identity. And soon you begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone who constantly doubts, but as someone who consistently shows up. Plato once said, Courage is knowing what not to fear, but maybe real courage is fearing everything and walking forward anyway. When you realize that you stop waiting for fear to vanish before you act, you start seeing fear as the backdrop against which your strength becomes visible. And when you have enough memory of doing this, enough data to point back to, doubt no longer defines you. Evidence does that the next time doubt rises. Don't fight it with slogans. Fight it with proof. Open the journal of your life and recall the storms you have already walked through. Let those memories speak louder than fear, because confidence is not built in the spotlight. It is built in the shadows and the quiet record of your persistence. And that record is already yours. Comparison is the silent thief that robs you of joy before you even realize it's entered the room. In today's world, it sneaks in through every glowing screen, through highlight reels carefully curated to look like real life. You scroll, and without meaning to, you measure. Their promotion against your stagnation, their vacation against your bills, their polished family photo against your tired reflection in the mirror. You forget that what you are seeing is a fragment, a filtered glimpse of someone else's story, stripped of struggle and framed for applause. And yet, that fragment becomes your ruler. You hold it up to your own life and declare yourself behind. But you are not behind. You are on your path. The Stoics saw this clearly long before social media existed. Epictetus warned that we should never tie our worth to things outside our control, especially not to the achievements of others. He said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And yet, how often do we hand over our inner peace by measuring our pace against someone else's? Every time you do, you trade your focus for anxiety, your gratitude for envy, your progress for paralysis. At midlife, the trap of comparison can feel even sharper. You see peers buying houses larger than yours, climbing corporate ladders faster, sending children to better schools. You wonder if you missed a step, if you wasted time, if you've somehow fallen behind an invisible schedule. But whose schedule is that? Who decided that by 40 you must be at a certain point, earning a certain amount, driving a certain car? Those timelines are illusions. Aristotle believed that each person's purpose, what he called telos, is unique. Trying to replicate someone else's purpose is like planting a tree and demanding it bloom like a flower. It is not wrong, but it is impossible. Your life has its own rhythm, its own pace, its own lessons. What looks like delay may be preparation. What feels like failure may be refinement. What appears quiet may be the very soil where your resilience is rooting itself. When you measure yourself against another person's highlight reel, you not only misjudge yourself, you also miss the opportunity to notice the growth that is happening in you, slowly and steadily, in ways no algorithm could ever capture. The truth is, comparison does not only steal joy, it steals clarity. It convinces you to aim at goals you never truly wanted, simply because they look good in someone else's story. You begin chasing shadows, trying to match a script that was never yours to live. And in the process, you lose sight of what actually matters to you, the small wins, the steady habits, the personal integrity that no one else sees, but that builds the foundation of your life. So the next time you catch yourself scrolling and shrinking, pause. Ask yourself, Am I really behind, or am I just looking at the wrong scoreboard? Because the only competition that truly matters is with the person you were yesterday. Did you learn? Did you grow even a little? Did you try, even when it felt easier to quit? If so, you are not losing. You are evolving. An evolution measured in self-awareness and small steps is infinitely more valuable than any fleeting spotlight moment. The Stoics would remind us that the good life is not about how much you have, but how well you live. Your purpose is not to outshine others. It is to fulfill your own capacity, to walk your own path with steadiness. The world does not need another imitation of someone else's success. It needs the authentic strength that only you can bring, and you will never uncover that strength while staring at someone else's reflection. Comparison is a thief. Don't give it your peace. Don't let it set the rhythm of your life. Reclaim your focus, your gratitude, and your progress. Because when you do, you will see what has been true all along. You are not behind. You are right where you need to be, learning the lessons meant only for you. Real progress is quieter than most people think. It isn't measured in promotions, applause, or milestones that can be posted online. It's measured in the subtle shifts of who you are becoming when no one is watching. The world teaches us to chase outcomes, the bigger paycheck, the visible title, the recognition that proves our worth. But outcomes lie. They rise and fall with timing, luck, and circumstances beyond your control. What doesn't lie are the choices you make every day, the habits you cultivate, the small victories you stack, the discipline you practice when nobody cares. That is where true progress lives. Aristotle believed that every person has a unique telos, a purpose that cannot be duplicated by anyone else. Trying to live someone else's purpose is like forcing a river to run uphill. It exhausts you, but it never fulfills you. Yet comparison often tricks us into chasing goals that were never ours to begin with. We adopt timelines that don't fit, careers that look good on paper but feel hollow in practice, lifestyles that impress others but drain us inside. Progress, then, is not about climbing faster on the wrong ladder. It is about making sure your ladder leans against the wall that matters to you. This matters most at midlife, when the pressure to measure yourself by external standards feels sharpest. You look around and see peers achieving in ways you haven't, and the temptation is to believe you've missed your chance. But ask yourself honestly, are you failing, or are you evolving in a direction that doesn't always show up in obvious ways? Maybe you're growing in patience. Maybe you're becoming more present for your family. Maybe you're finally learning to live with integrity instead of chasing approval. None of these things fit neatly into a resume, yet they are the kinds of progress that define a life well lived. Progress is also often invisible to the person living it. You might feel stuck, but if you look back at yourself 5 years ago, you'll notice the distance. Perhaps your reactions are calmer now. Perhaps you make decisions with more clarity. Perhaps you've let go of things that once consumed you. This is growth. It doesn't announce itself day by day, but it compounds. Like compound interest, small acts of alignment multiply over time into profound change. The Stoics would argue that progress is not about being free from hardship, but about learning how to face it better each time. Every challenge becomes training. Every setback becomes rehearsal for resilience. When you accept this, life stops feeling like a series of tests you keep failing and starts to look like a gym where your character is being strengthened. The weight doesn't mean weakness. It means resistance designed to build you. The real question is, how do you measure your life? If you rely only on external markers, you will forever feel at the mercy of forces you can't control. But if you measure progress by inner alignment, by whether your actions today reflect your values more than they did yesterday, then you will always have a reason to keep going. Because no matter how small the step, progress measured internally cannot be taken away by anyone else's success or society's shifting expectations. So ask yourself tonight, what did I do today that aligned with who I want to be? Did I choose patience over irritation? Did I stay honest when lying would have been easier? Did I take one step toward something meaningful, however small? If the answer is yes, then you are not stagnant. You are progressing. Slowly, quietly, steadily, the way true change has always worked. Stop chasing the dramatic transformation that looks good on a screen. Start respecting the invisible progress you're making when nobody notices. Because it's in those quiet, uncelebrated decisions that your life is being reshaped. Real progress is not loud. It is consistent. It is steady. And over time, it builds a strength that no applause can give and no failure can take away. Fear is clever. It rarely shows up wearing the name fear. Instead, it disguises itself as logic, as caution, as wisdom. It tells you to wait until you're more prepared, more qualified, more confident. It whispers, not yet, not now, maybe later, and so you delay, convinced you're being sensible, when in truth you are being stalled. The hesitation feels protective, but it is actually paralyzing. Because readiness doesn't appear like a guest knocking at your door. Readiness is built brick by brick through action. You don't wait until you feel brave to act. You act, and in acting, you become brave. This is why your relationship with fear matters more than your attempts to erase it. Fear is not going anywhere. It is stitched into being human. What matters is how you carry it. When you treat fear as an enemy, you either fight it endlessly or pretend it isn't there. Neither works. But when you treat fear as a signal, as a teacher, everything changes. Carl Jung said, "Where your fear is, there is your task." In other words, the very place that makes you hesitate is the exact place that can unlock your growth. Think about it. Most of the fears we wrestle with at this stage of life are not threats to survival. They are threats to ego, to comfort, to identity. You don't fear a tiger waiting outside your door. You fear rejection, failure, embarrassment, starting over, admitting you were wrong. These fears feel enormous, but they are not fatal. They are uncomfortable, and discomfort is where growth lives. When something both scares you and excites you, pay attention. That is the edge of your potential calling you forward. Consider the first time you stepped into a new role, raised your hand for an opportunity, or started something you didn't fully understand. Fear was there, and yet you moved anyway. Maybe your voice trembled. Maybe your steps were shaky, but you acted. That moment was not proof of weakness. It was proof of courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is motion in spite of it. Every time you step forward with fear beside you, you rewrite the script your mind runs on. Instead of "I can only act when I feel ready," the script becomes, I act, and that is how I become ready. If you want to build a life of strength, you must stop waiting to feel fearless. That day will not come. Waiting to be fearless is waiting to be someone you're not. Instead, learn to walk shoulder to shoulder with fear. Let it sharpen you. Let it point to the places where you are still alive, still stretching, still becoming. Fear is not a stop sign. It is a spotlight. It illuminates the exact areas where you are still limited by old stories. And by stepping into that light, you begin to break those limits. There will be times when fear shouts so loudly you feel frozen. In those moments, remember, movement, even small movement, is your ally. Send the email. Take the walk. Start the project. Say the first word. Fear grows stronger in silence and avoidance. It weakens when confronted with action. Each small act proves to yourself that you are not its prisoner. Over time, fear becomes less of a tyrant and more of a companion, still present, but no longer in control. Your future self is not waiting for you to be fearless. It is waiting for you to move, to step forward, trembling, to act unready, to keep showing up while fear mutters in the background. That is how confidence is born, not in the absence of fear, but in your refusal to let fear dictate the terms of your life. So the next time fear rises, don't push it away. Look it in the eye. Ask it what lesson it carries. Then take one step forward, however small, because each step weakens fear's grip and strengthens your own. And slowly you discover the truth. Fear never really disappears, but neither does your ability to walk with it. And walking with it is enough. Discipline has long been misunderstood. Too many people hear the word and imagine punishment, rigidity, or the stripping away of joy. But real discipline is none of these things. Discipline is not a cage. It is a form of liberation. It is the quiet power of structure, the steady rhythm that gives you freedom when everything else feels chaotic. Think of the times when life around you spun out of control, the deadlines, the arguments, the disappointments. What held you steady? It wasn't fleeting motivation. It wasn't a burst of inspiration. It was the habits you had built, the routines that reminded you who you were even when doubt tried to erase it. Motivation is a visitor. It comes, it lifts you for a moment, and then it leaves. Discipline is the resident that stays behind. When motivation disappears, discipline is what carries you forward. It is the act of showing up even when you don't feel like it. It is lacing your shoes when the bed calls you back. It is choosing patience in the middle of anger. It is saying no to distractions so that your deeper yes can be honored. Aristotle wrote, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. He was right. Who you are becoming is not built in occasional moments of intensity, but in the daily rhythm of what you choose again and again. At this stage of life, between 35 and 45, the power of discipline becomes even more crucial. You no longer have the luxury of waiting until conditions are perfect. Responsibilities are too real. Time feels too scarce, energy too valuable. And yet, it is precisely in this season that discipline reveals its true gift, stability. When you build a steady practice, whether that's in how you work, how you care for your health, or how you nurture your mind, you are no longer tossed about by moods and circumstances. You stop being at the mercy of whatever emotion shows up in the morning. You gain a ground to stand on. This doesn't mean your routines need to be rigid. Discipline is not perfection. It is intention. A sacred rhythm, not a harsh prison. 5 minutes of meditation, a short walk after dinner, a consistent bedtime, journaling a few lines before sleep. These small anchors remind you that you are capable of shaping your own life. And when doubt creeps in, when the fog of self-questioning makes you lose sight of who you are, these habits speak for you. They say, I know who I am because I show up for myself. Think of the times you broke promises to yourself. How did you feel? Likely smaller, weaker, less trustworthy in your own eyes. Now think of the times you kept those promises, even when nobody else knew. That's when trust in yourself grew. That trust is confidence. That trust is resilience. Discipline is simply the act of keeping enough small promises to yourself that your identity shifts. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who only acts when it's easy. You start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. That shift changes everything. Discipline also rewires your relationship with freedom. Many people think freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But the Stoics understood freedom differently. Real freedom is being in command of yourself, not being enslaved by impulses. The person who always acts on comfort is not free. They are a prisoner of comfort. The person who can choose discomfort when it serves a higher value is free because they are no longer ruled by craving or fear. So the next time you hear the word discipline, don't imagine a harsh taskmaster. Imagine a quiet, steady companion walking beside you. It doesn't shout. It doesn't punish. It reminds. It anchors. It whispers. You can count on yourself. And that kind of reliability, practiced day after day, moment after moment, creates a strength that is unshakable. Discipline is not about being hard on yourself. It is about respecting yourself enough to show up consistently. It is the daily act of self-loyalty. And in a world that constantly pulls at your attention, demands your energy, and tries to sell you shortcuts, that loyalty is rare, powerful, and freeing. Discipline doesn't limit your life. It expands it. Because when you can trust yourself to act with consistency, you no longer wait for the perfect moment. You realize you already have the tools to move forward, one steady step at a time. Detachment is another word that gets misunderstood. Many think it means apathy, indifference, or not caring. But that is not what the Stoics taught, and it is not what true strength requires. Detachment is not a withdrawal from life. It is a refusal to let outcomes dictate your worth. It is the ability to give your best, to commit fully, and still remain steady whether things go your way or not. It is not about caring less. It is about caring deeply without collapsing when results don't arrive on your timetable. In a culture obsessed with metrics, likes, promotions, and recognition, detachment feels almost impossible. From childhood, we are taught to measure ourselves by grades, trophies, salaries, titles. By midlife, the pattern is ingrained. We rise and fall with every success and failure, as though each one were a verdict on who we are. When a project lands well, we glow. When it fails, we shrink. This cycle leaves us fragile, at the mercy of circumstances that were never fully under our control. The Stoics warned us about this long ago. Marcus Aurelius did not measure his life by victories in battle or by the approval of the Senate. He measured it by whether his actions aligned with virtue, with integrity. Epictetus reminded his students, "Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens the way it happens, and you will be happy." This was not passivity. It was mastery. It was the understanding that you cannot control the outcome, but you can always control the effort, the intention, the integrity of your choices. When you live with detachment, failure loses its power to define you, and success loses its power to inflate you. You learn to ride both with the same steadiness. You give your best, knowing that results are shaped by countless variables, timing, environment, chance, none of which can measure your character. When a win comes, you celebrate but do not cling. When a loss comes, you learn but do not collapse. Either way, your identity remains intact, rooted in something deeper than the scoreboard. Detachment is particularly urgent in your late 30s and 40s, when external achievements tend to dominate conversations. Who has the bigger house, the better car, the higher position? You may find yourself caught between what society calls success and what your soul quietly longs for. Detachment allows you to stop chasing applause and start listening inward. It lets you pursue excellence without being enslaved to recognition. It lets you work hard without tying your worth to the outcome. Imagine what it would feel like to wake up tomorrow and no longer let yesterday's results determine today's self-respect. To know that whether a deal closed or fell apart, whether you were praised or ignored, you remain the same steady person. That is what detachment offers, stability in a world that constantly tries to shake you. Detachment does not mean you stop striving. It means you stop tying your identity to what cannot be guaranteed. You can love your work and still be at peace if it fails. You can pour your heart into a relationship and still know your worth if it ends. You can train for months, run the race, and accept both victory and loss without letting either rewrite who you are. This is not indifference. This is freedom. So the next time you find yourself grasping tightly to an outcome, pause. Ask, what am I afraid will happen if this doesn't go the way I want? Will I stop respecting myself? Will I let the world tell me that one result defines me? Detachment breaks that chain. It teaches you that you are not the echo of results. You are the effort, the decision, the person who shows up regardless. And when you live this way, you become unshakable. The storms still come, the winds still change, but you stand rooted because your foundation is no longer the shifting ground of outcomes. It is the solid ground of your own integrity. Identity is not a sudden transformation. It isn't built in a single dramatic moment where the music swells and everything changes. Identity is shaped in silence and repetition, in the choices you make when no one is keeping score. Who you become is the sum of countless small actions strung together across days and years. And yet, most of us live as though we are waiting for one defining moment to finally rewrite our story. We think, when I get that job, when I lose that weight, when I earn that recognition, then I will be different. But identity does not wait at the finish line. It is being written right now in the ordinary choices you make today, Socrates once said, "The soul has dyed the color of its thoughts." What you repeat to yourself, what you choose to dwell on, what you reinforce through action, that is the dye that colors your being. If your daily thoughts are soaked in doubt, your identity will begin to reflect it. If your daily choices echo hesitation, your character will bend in that direction. But the same law works in reverse. If you practice courage in small, steady acts, even while trembling, your identity begins to carry that courage. If you honor discipline when it would be easier to quit, your character begins to absorb that discipline as part of who you are. This is why small victories matter. Not because anyone notices them, but because you notice them. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even one so minor that others would laugh at it, you shift your sense of who you are. I said I would walk for 10 minutes, and I did. That act, repeated over weeks, shapes your self-image more powerfully than a grand resolution abandoned after 2 days. Identity is not forged in intensity, but in consistency. At this stage of life, it is easy to feel cemented into a fixed self. You've carried certain labels for years: quiet, indecisive, anxious, underachieving. You've heard the same internal stories so many times it feels permanent. But identity is not static. It is fluid, and it bends with the weight of your actions. Every time you act with integrity, you cast a vote for a stronger self. Every time you act with patience, you cast a vote for a calmer self. The votes accumulate, and eventually the identity shifts. Not overnight, not dramatically, but undeniably. The challenge is that negative voices often feel louder than the quiet work of progress. You might act with courage 10 times, but then hesitate once, and that single hesitation echoes in your mind like a verdict. But you are not your weakest moment. You are the sum of the habits you return to. The work, then, is not to eliminate every failure, but to build a rhythm of choices so steady that no single misstep can define you. Think of your life as a loop. Identity shapes action, and action reinforces identity. If you believe you are weak, you act timidly, which reinforces the story that you are weak. If you begin to act with quiet strength, speaking clearly, holding a boundary, showing up consistently, you reinforce the story that you are capable. The loop is always running. The question is, are you feeding the loop that keeps you small, or the one that calls you forward? Your identity is not decided by applause, by recognition, or by comparison. It is decided by you in the hidden choices of daily life. Who are you when no one is watching? When there is no reward waiting? When it is only you and the silence? That is where your identity is being written, and that is where your power lies. So stop waiting for a new name, a new role, a new validation to change how you see yourself. Start living as the person you want to become today in the smallest actions you can sustain. Over time, those choices accumulate into a truth that cannot be denied. You are not the person who only doubts. You are the person who acts anyway. That is how identity transforms quietly, steadily, permanently. Humility has often been confused with shrinking, as if to be humble means to hide your gifts, silence your voice, and make yourself smaller so others feel comfortable. But real humility is nothing like that. True humility is not about erasing yourself. It is about standing firm without needing to be the loudest in the room. It is about offering your strength with grace rather than performance. It is the quiet presence that doesn't clamor for attention, yet cannot be ignored because it is rooted in authenticity. Many of us were taught early that confidence was arrogance, that ambition was selfish, that wanting more somehow made us ungrateful. So we learned to downplay our victories, to apologize for our goals, to tuck away the parts of ourselves that might intimidate others. By midlife, this pattern can feel second nature. You hold back not because you are weak, but because you have been conditioned to believe your light is too much. But humility does not ask you to disappear. It asks you to contribute without obsession over credit. It asks you to remain grounded, not invisible. Socrates once said, to find yourself, think for yourself. When you do, you realize that humility is not about denying your strengths, but about using them with clarity. A humble person does not walk into a room shouting about their power. A humble person simply walks into a room aligned with their values, acting with integrity, unshaken by whether anyone applauds. Humility is strength under control, a force steady enough not to need validation. Think about the people you respect most. Chances are it isn't the ones who brag, posture, or demand recognition. It's the ones who carry themselves with calm authority, who speak with conviction when needed, and remain silent when not. They do not diminish themselves, but they also don't inflate themselves. They are present, grounded, whole. That is the posture of humility. Living with humility in this sense means no longer performing for approval. It means releasing the constant need to be liked, praised, or understood. And at midlife, this shift can be revolutionary. Imagine no longer editing yourself just to avoid judgment. Imagine no longer apologizing for your ambition, but neither flaunting it. Imagine simply standing in your truth, steady and unshaken. That is humility. But humility is not passive. It requires courage. Courage to say what needs to be said, even if it's unpopular. Courage to hold to your principles when compromise would be easier. Courage to step forward when silence would feel safer. This courage is not about noise. It is about presence. And presence changes everything. When you stop performing and start living aligned with what matters, you no longer need the approval of the crowd. Your strength is enough. In a noisy world, humility looks radical. While everyone else competes for attention, you quietly live your values. While others scramble to be seen, you focus on being true. And ironically, that authenticity becomes magnetic. People begin to notice, not because you demanded it, but because presence cannot be ignored. So humility is not erasing yourself. It is embodying yourself with integrity. It is saying, I don't need to be the center of attention to live with meaning. I don't need to hide my gifts to make others comfortable. I can stand here as I am, steady, calm, real, and that is enough. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more grounded voices, more quiet examples of integrity, more people willing to live with conviction instead of performance. And that is the kind of humility you can practice daily, in the way you speak, in the way you act, in the way you refuse to vanish or boast. A humility that is strong, clear, and deeply human. The fire inside you never truly goes out. It may dim, it may retreat, it may lie hidden under years of stress, criticism, or neglect, but it does not die. What dies is our attention to it. We stop feeding it. We forget how to listen to that inner spark. But the truth is, the core of who you are, the part that refuses to break, even when life gets heavy, is still there, waiting for recognition. At midlife, many people think they have to start over, to reinvent themselves from scratch. But you are not starting over. You are returning. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Becoming is not about building a brand new version of yourself. It is about peeling away the noise, the borrowed stories, the false identities, until what remains is the person you always were. That child who once ran without fear, who spoke without apology, who felt invincible in fleeting moments of clarity. That was not arrogance. That was truth. Life did not erase that truth. It buried it under expectations, under criticism you didn't deserve, under failures you mistook for final verdicts. Your work now is not to fabricate a stronger self. It is to remember the one that has been waiting under the surface all along. Think of times in your life when that fire briefly broke through the fog. A crisis came, and you stood tall without knowing where the strength came from. A challenge arrived, and you surprised yourself with resilience. These glimpses were not anomalies. They were reminders, proof that the spark has never left you. The problem is not its absence, but your neglect. You stopped tending it. You let other voices drown it out. But the spark is patient. It waits for you to choose it again. The choice is rarely loud or dramatic. It doesn't require a speech, a public declaration, or a radical change overnight. It begins quietly with a firm decision, whispered to yourself, "I will not abandon who I am anymore." Every time you act from that place, the fire grows. Every time you honor the voice inside that says, "I was made for more than this," you feed it. And with each act of alignment, your life begins to shift. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you see yourself differently. This is the essence of reclaiming your inner fire. To stop seeking constant validation outside and start offering recognition within. To stop waiting for applause and start building trust with yourself. To realize that every time you doubted, every time you stumbled, every time you felt lost, the fire endured anyway. It endured so that today, right now, you still have the chance to reignite it. You are not broken. You are buried. You are not weak. You are waiting. The fire has not disappeared. It has only been silenced by stories that were never yours to carry. And when you decide to let those stories go, when you finally stop mistaking other people's judgments for truth, you begin to hear your own voice again. A voice that doesn't need to shout because it is steady. A voice that doesn't need constant approval because it already knows. That voice whispers, "I am not done. I am not defeated. I am remembering." And when you live from that remembrance, something subtle but powerful happens. You no longer chase identity and external achievements. You embody it. You no longer scramble for confidence. You practice it. You no longer wait for permission. You give it to yourself. The fire inside you has been waiting. It does not ask for perfection. It asks for attention. Feed it with your choices, with your integrity, with your willingness to keep showing up even when no one notices. And as you do, you will realize you never lost it. You only needed to remember, the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. We live in a culture that equates volume with power, performance with confidence, and visibility with value. But the truth is almost always the opposite. Real strength moves quietly. It doesn't need to broadcast itself because it is too busy being lived. True confidence isn't built on applause. It is built on presence, on the ability to keep showing up whether anyone is watching or not. Think of the times you've seen someone desperate to prove themselves. Every achievement was posted, every small win exaggerated, every interaction staged for recognition. That is not confidence. That is insecurity wearing a costume. The strongest people are often the ones who move without announcement, who build without needing validation, who live aligned with their values whether or not anyone notices. Their power is steady, grounded, and invisible until the results speak for themselves. We have been conditioned to think that if nobody sees it, it doesn't count. If you don't share it online, it didn't happen. If there's no recognition, it must not matter. But this belief is corrosive. It reduces life to a performance, every action staged for an imagined audience. The Stoics would have found this absurd. They knew that the value of an action lies not in who notices it, but in the integrity with which it is done. Confidence is not about proving. It is about knowing. When you truly know who you are, you no longer need the world to clap for you. You no longer measure yourself against the constant scoreboard of attention. You simply keep showing up day after day when the spotlight is off, when the crowd is gone, when it is just you and the work in front of you. That is where confidence takes shape. Not in noise, but in consistency. Not in volume, but in steadiness. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And the truest measure is not what you do when the crowd is cheering, but what you do when no one is there to notice. The discipline to act with integrity in silence, to work diligently without applause, to live in alignment without recognition, this is power. Because eventually the world does notice. But by then the results are already written in who you have become. So let them overlook you. Let them underestimate you. Let them dismiss the quiet rhythm of your consistency. In time, silence will disturb them more than noise ever could. Discipline will unsettle them more than bravado. And results will speak louder than any speech you could ever give. The next time you feel invisible, remember, invisibility is not weakness. It is training. It is preparation. It is the sacred space where confidence is forged without distraction. Do the work in the shadows because the shadows will shape your strength. When the world finally looks your way, you won't need to explain yourself. You'll simply stand and your life will already be the proof. Confidence that depends on attention is fragile. Confidence that is built in silence is unshakable. Choose the latter. Keep showing up even when no one notices. Especially when no one notices. Because in those moments you are not performing. You are becoming. And becoming will always outlast applause. There comes a point when you realize you've spent too much of your life shrinking, tucking parts of yourself away, apologizing for your ambition, lowering your voice so others don't feel threatened. And after years of doing this, you begin to mistake smallness for virtue. But shrinking is not humility. Shrinking is surrender. And you were not built to disappear. Ambition is not arrogance. It is clarity. It is that inner knowing that you were meant to create, to contribute, to build something that matters. Somewhere along the way, you were told that striving made you selfish, that wanting more made you ungrateful, that confidence was a threat. But none of that was about you. It was about the comfort of others. Real humility does not ask you to hide your gifts. It asks you to use them with grace, to offer them without needing to dominate, to stand tall without needing to tower over anyone else. Fear will tell you to stay silent. Society will reward you for blending in. But the voice inside that whispers, "I was made for more," is not ego, it's truth. That whisper has survived every attempt to quiet it, every season of doubt, every storm you've carried alone. If it is still here, it is because it is meant to be heard. The courage to honor that voice doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like saying no when you'd rather say yes just to keep the peace. Sometimes it looks like asking for what you need without softening the edges. Sometimes it looks like starting again at an age when the world expects you to settle. These are not signs of arrogance. They are signs of life, signs that you are refusing to vanish into the background. The world does not need more noise. It does not need more posturing or empty performances. What it needs is grounded presence, people who stand in their truth without apology, people who contribute without begging for recognition, people who understand that strength and grace are not opposites, but partners. So stop apologizing for wanting more. Stop pretending your gifts don't matter. Stop editing yourself to keep others comfortable. You were not made to fade. You were made to bring something only you can bring. To live fully present, fully alive, fully awake to the fire inside you. And when you do, you'll discover something important. You don't need permission to be this version of yourself. You only need the courage to stop hiding. Because the world is loud, but your steady presence, lived with clarity and conviction, will always be louder. What holds most people back is not fear itself, but the grip they allow fear to have on their choices. Fear, left unexamined, becomes a driver you hand the wheel to. It decides where you go, how fast you move, and whether you move at all. But fear is not meant to steer your life. It is meant to signal where growth is waiting. When you strip fear down to its core, most of what remains isn't life-threatening. It's ego-threatening. You're not afraid of dying when you take a risk. You're afraid of being embarrassed, misunderstood, rejected. You're not afraid of collapse. You're afraid of having to admit the last path wasn't right for you. And when you see fear for what it is, discomfort, not danger, you begin to loosen its grip. You stop treating it as a stop sign and start reading it as a compass pointing you toward the places you need to face. Carl Jung once said, "Where your fear is, there is your task." Think about that. The conversation you've been avoiding, the dream you keep postponing, the decision you delay because you're waiting to feel ready. Those are not accidents. They are invitations. They are the exact places where your potential is waiting to be unlocked. If something scares you and excites you at the same time, that is the signal. That is the edge where growth happens. Growth does not live in the safe and the familiar. If everything feels easy and predictable, it means you are repeating old chapters. And repetition is comfortable, but it rarely transforms you. Transformation happens in the tension, in the uncertainty, in the willingness to move forward even while your legs shake. The goal is not to eliminate fear, but to walk beside it, shoulder to shoulder, without letting it dictate your worth. When you reframe fear this way, it stops being an obstacle and becomes a teacher. Each fear carries a lesson. The fear of failure teaches resilience. The fear of rejection teaches self-respect. The fear of change teaches adaptability. Instead of avoiding these lessons, embrace them. Sit with the fear, name it, and then act anyway. Action in the presence of fear is what builds courage. And courage, repeated daily, becomes confidence. Imagine if you no longer waited for the day when fear disappeared. Imagine if you accepted that fear would always be present, but you no longer obeyed it. How much would open up? How many opportunities would you finally step into? How much of yourself would you finally allow to live fully, without delay? The truth is, fear will always walk beside you. But you get to decide whether it walks ahead, pulling you back, or beside you, reminding you of what matters. Choose the latter. Let fear be your guide, not your jailer. Let it point you toward the edges of your potential, and then step forward anyway. Because every time you do, the grip loosens, the spark grows, and your life expands in ways you once thought impossible. Discipline is often mistaken for restriction, but when lived rightly, it is the foundation of freedom. It is not about punishing yourself or stripping away joy. It is about building a structure sturdy enough to carry you through chaos. When everything feels uncertain, when emotions pull in one direction and circumstances push in another, discipline is the anchor that steadies you. It is not glamorous. It rarely looks impressive from the outside, but it is the quiet rhythm that makes resilience possible. Think of the moments when you relied on sheer willpower and motivation. They worked for a while, then vanished. Motivation is like a spark, bright, hot, fleeting. Discipline is the woodpile, steady, reliable, ready to burn long after the spark has died. Without the wood, the flame cannot last. Without discipline, motivation cannot sustain you. The routines you create are not cages. They are reminders. Waking early to move your body, journaling before bed, pausing to breathe before responding. These are not small acts. They are daily signals to your nervous system. We can be trusted. We can stay steady. We can move forward no matter what comes. Over time, these signals form a foundation. And when the storms arrive, as they always do, you discover that you are not tossed around so easily anymore. Aristotle wrote, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. What you repeat daily becomes who you are. If you repeatedly choose excuses, you become someone who doubts their own word. If you repeatedly choose consistency, even in small ways, you become someone who trusts themselves. That trust is the deepest form of confidence. Not the confidence that needs applause, but the confidence that says, "I know I will show up." Because I always do. At this stage of life, discipline is not about proving something to the world. It is about proving something to yourself. You don't need to broadcast it. You don't need recognition. What matters is that when doubt creeps in, you have evidence. The countless times you kept going when it would have been easier to quit. The days you held the line when nobody noticed. Those become your proof. And proof builds power. Discipline also protects you from the constant noise of the world. Every day you are bombarded with distractions, temptations, and shortcuts. Without structure, you're pulled in 100 directions. But with structure, you reclaim authority over your life. You decide what matters. You decide where your energy goes. And slowly, through repetition, your life begins to take shape around your values instead of other people's demands. This is why discipline is not punishment. It is a declaration of self-respect. Each habit, each small promise kept, says, I matter enough to show up for myself. And when you live that way, you stop being enslaved by moods, impulses, and external approval. You become anchored. You become free. You've been taught to tie your worth to outcomes, but outcomes are deceptive. They are shaped by timing, by circumstances you can't control, by the choices of other people. When things go well, you glow with pride. When things fall apart, you question your value. Living this way makes you fragile, forever at the mercy of what happens outside you. But the Stoics knew better. They taught that true peace comes not from controlling results, but from controlling effort, intention, and integrity. Marcus Aurelius did not measure his life by the victories of the empire or the praise of the Senate. He measured it by whether his actions reflected virtue. Epictetus reminded his students, do not wish for events to unfold exactly as you want them to, but wish to want them as they unfold. That is not passivity. That is wisdom. It is the understanding that you cannot command outcomes, but you can always command yourself. When you live this way, detachment transforms you. You give your best to the work, but you are not crushed if it fails. You love deeply, but you are not destroyed if it ends. You commit fully, but you are not defined by the result. Detachment is not coldness. It is mastery. It is caring with your whole heart, while knowing your worth does not hang on what happens next. Think about how much suffering comes from expecting the world to validate you. You push for a promotion, and when it doesn't arrive, you collapse. You share your creativity, and when the applause is thin, you shrink. You love, and when the love isn't returned the way you hoped, you question your worth. But the truth is, none of these results could ever define you. They are reflections of circumstance, not reflections of identity. Detachment teaches you to separate effort from ego, to love the process more than the prize, to find joy in the work itself rather than in the recognition it brings. And ironically, when you live this way, the results often follow anyway, because steadiness outperforms desperation, and presence is more powerful than performance. This shift is especially vital in midlife. You've seen enough by now to know that life is unpredictable. Careers change, relationships evolve, health rises and falls. If your self-worth is tethered to outcomes, you will always be unstable. But if your worth is rooted in integrity and showing up fully, regardless of what happens, then nothing can shake you. Imagine waking tomorrow with that freedom. To give your all, to care deeply, to invest yourself completely, and still be steady no matter how the story unfolds. That is the strength of detachment. It does not make you indifferent. It makes you unbreakable. Growth rarely comes as a grand revelation. It is not a single cinematic moment where everything shifts in an instant. Real transformation is a series of small, honest choices, repeated day after day, often without recognition. It is the decision to take the next step when the staircase is hidden. It is the courage to whisper no when saying yes would make you more popular. It is the strength to get up and face the day even when your whole body begs you to disappear. Plato said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. That victory doesn't arrive all at once. It is forged in quiet decisions, choosing truth when lies would be easier, choosing integrity when shortcuts would bring faster praise, choosing discipline when comfort tempts you to stop. Each small act of alignment rewrites how you see yourself. You begin to stop identifying as the one who always doubts and start seeing yourself as the one who acts anyway. An identity built this way becomes durable because it is grounded not in noise, but in action. By the time you reach midlife, you realize the most important battles are not external. They are internal. You don't need to defeat enemies out there as much as you need to conquer hesitation, fear, and self-sabotage in here. And every small victory, every time you resist the urge to procrastinate, every time you hold a boundary, every time you stay patient instead of lashing out, is a win in that battle. Those wins accumulate. They form a loop. Action shapes identity. Identity shapes action. Each reinforces the other until you trust yourself not because of grand speeches, but because of consistent choices. Self-respect is not built in public. It is built in private, in the hidden moments when no one is watching and no one will applaud. It is in those unseen choices that you create a foundation so steady it cannot be shaken by failure or inflated by success. When you know who you are in silence, the noise of the world loses its power. This is why transformation feels subtle. You might not notice it happening, but one day you respond differently than you would have a year ago. You stay calm where you once would have exploded. You persist where you once would have quit. You speak clearly where you once stayed silent. And in that moment, you realize the change already happened. It was never about a sudden event. It was about the accumulation of steady steps, each one reshaping you from the inside out. So stop waiting for the dramatic breakthrough. Start respecting the quiet victories. The moment you choose alignment, even in something small, you are already winning. And the more often you win these hidden battles, the more unshakable you become. Stop waiting for the world to recognize you before you recognize yourself. Too often, we shrink because the results haven't arrived yet, because the applause hasn't come, because the evidence others can see feels too thin. But the truth is, your confidence isn't built on what they notice. It's built on what you repeatedly do when nobody notices. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, you are laying a brick of self-respect. Wake up early when you said you would. Keep the workout short but consistent. Finish the task you've been putting off. These are not trivial. They are proof. And proof matters far more than inspiration, because proof changes how you see yourself. Inspiration fades. Proof stays. The mind is your battlefield, but it is also your sanctuary. Most of your struggles are not with reality, but with the story you tell yourself about reality. The event happens, and then your mind spins it into fear, into shame, into the quiet refrain of "this always happens to me." Left unchallenged, these stories become scripts, and you live them out not because they are true, but because they are familiar. But you can interrupt them. You can stop letting every thought walk unchallenged into your life. You can become the gatekeeper of your own mind. This begins with stillness, not silence, but awareness. The pause between stimulus and response. The moment where you step back and ask, where did this thought come from? Whose voice is this really? Does this belief reflect truth or just old programming? When you begin to audit your thoughts, you discover how many of them are borrowed, how many are outdated, how many are not yours at all. And in that discovery lies freedom. Carl Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Facing your mind is not glamorous, but it is liberating. It's where clarity replaces noise, where self-respect replaces self-doubt. And it doesn't require hours of meditation or dramatic retreats. It requires a willingness to notice, to question, and to replace. Replace judgment with understanding. Replace assumption with curiosity. Replace self-condemnation with honest reflection. When you live this way, your mind becomes less of an enemy and more of an ally. It stops inventing problems and begins creating clarity. It stops shrinking you and begins strengthening you. And with a trained mind, you discover that most of your battles were never with the world at all. They were with your own unchecked thoughts. Confidence built this way is uncheckable because it is not dependent on applause or outcomes. It is built on trust, trust in yourself, earned through repeated choices and sharpened through mental clarity. This is the kind of confidence no one can take from you, because it is not given by the world. It is given by you. You've been taught to measure yourself by outcomes, but outcomes are fickle. One success feels fleeting. One failure feels like a verdict, and you end up riding an emotional roller coaster controlled by forces outside you. But what if you stopped measuring yourself by what happens and started measuring yourself by how faithfully you show up? The Stoics understood this long before algorithms and awards. They knew that the real measure of a life is not victories won or losses endured, but whether you lived aligned with virtue, whether your choices reflected integrity, consistency, and courage. Detachment in this sense is not giving up. It is giving your all without being owned by the result. You can love deeply, work diligently, strive passionately, and still remain steady when things don't go your way. This is not indifference. It is mastery. It is the freedom of knowing that you are not your wins or your losses. You are the effort itself. You are the one who chooses, not the echo of what happens afterward. Real growth also teaches you to stop chasing dramatic transformations. Life is not a movie. There will be no moment when the music swells and everything changes at once. Growth is incremental. It is built in small, daily acts of alignment. You don't need to see the whole staircase. You only need to take the next step, the one right in front of you, the one that feels hard but true. Courage often looks like something ordinary. Saying no when you'd rather keep the peace. Telling the truth when a lie would be easier. Getting out of bed when every part of you wants to hide. These ordinary acts of courage, repeated daily, create extraordinary strength. Over time, you begin to see yourself differently. Not as the one who always doubts, but as the one who keeps acting anyway. Not as the one who shrinks, but as the one who shows up. Each choice, each step, each repetition rewires how you see yourself. And as identity shifts, action becomes easier. You no longer ask, "Am I the kind of person who can do this?" You simply do it because it's who you are. So who are you when no one is watching? Who are you in the silence, when there is no applause, no recognition, no audience? That is the real test. That is where self-respect is forged. And if you can learn to respect yourself in the dark, you will carry a strength into the light that no amount of criticism can shake and no amount of praise can inflate. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for perfect timing. Stop waiting for the world to declare you ready. You are already in motion. You are already becoming. And the fire you've been waiting for, it never left. It was always inside you, waiting for you to notice, to feed it, to trust it again. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. Every day, in ways both visible and invisible, your life has been shaping you into someone stronger than you realize. The doubts you carry are not proof of weakness. They are simply old voices that forgot to notice your strength. The fears you feel are not warnings to stop. They are invitations to grow. The setbacks you've endured are not verdicts. They are training grounds for resilience. The Stoics knew that the good life is not about chasing applause, collecting trophies, or securing guarantees. It is about aligning with what matters most. It is about choosing discipline when comfort calls, choosing courage when fear whispers, choosing presence when distractions scream. These are not dramatic acts, but steady ones. And it is steadiness, not spectacle, that builds a life of substance. Look back at what you have survived. The nights when quitting would have been easier. The mornings when you carried weight no one else saw. The seasons when you felt invisible but kept showing up. That is your resume. That is your proof. And if you have carried yourself this far, you already have the evidence you need to trust yourself for the road ahead. So stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting for fear to vanish. Stop waiting for permission. Everything you need is already within you. The fire never left. It only waits for you to remember, to feed it, to let it burn steady again. When you finally believe that truth, you will see yourself differently, not as the one who doubts, but as the one who acts, who endures, who becomes . And if this message stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Let this be the beginning. Join me and others who are walking the same path of strength, clarity, and quiet power. This is what StoicCraft exists for, a space where ancient wisdom meets modern struggle, where we learn to live with resilience in a world full of noise. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and take the next step in your own journey, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more grounded people. It needs you, steady, clear, awake to the fire within you. Your life is not waiting to begin. It has already begun. All that's left is for you to live it fully, one courageous step at a time.